Hello there, my name is Professor Mem and I have spent a lot of time playing Battlefield 2042 lately. And as proud as I am of the 5.5-hour video I made on the subject, rather than being entirely sick of the topic, I surprisingly felt the desire to make something else. Something more fun, more personal, and much more concise. For context, in March I released a mammoth video covering many aspects of BF 2042, but mostly its guns, examining each one in detail. I learned a lot, but kept things partly impersonal, and took an encyclopedic approach. So even though I said I wasn't going to do tier lists for this game, I have yet to express all my opinions on the guns. And who doesn't love a good tier list? So I decided to do a bit of a compromise. Because I can afford to go very light on the details and I don't want to make 7 tier list videos for this game, I'm going to go over all the guns almost a lightning round style in a single video. Though I'll be making a distinct tier list for each class, ranking them relative to each other within the same class. If you've already seen the gun guide, I try to waste as little time as possible here on retreads, and give you a new personal angle. And if you haven't seen it, this video can serve as a Cliff's Notes and you can decide whether to dive deeper. If you're not familiar with my style of tier lists, then I'll warn you that I am not a top level or, meta focused player in the slightest. And also that as per my disclaimer, my evaluations are not objective, but rather based on my personal opinions and subjective biases in addition to stats. And believe me, I have some uncommon takes. Speaking of which, I will only seldom be quoting any direct stats or getting into details in this video, and rather plan on leaving the gun descriptions more vague to keep the video at a decent runtime, as there are so many facets to any single weapon. So if you ever find yourself wanting to know more specifics or maybe my deeper reasoning for feeling a certain way, feel free to check out the big gun guide. But because that video is already made, today we're keeping it light. Alright, let's start out with the sidearms. G57. The G57 is the textbook definition of a good sidearm for this type of game. It's got a high volume of fire at a low max damage per shot, but with very good damage retention. As a game whose automatic weapons generally tend to be faster, less damaging per shot up close, but much greater for use at range, a burst fire pistol that kills in 5 or 6 shots is a perfect fit. If a sidearm is your option for close-range defense, in a world where a pocket pistol doesn't cut it anymore, a 3-shot burst is the perfect thing for an authoritative deterrent whilst not being conducive to range. But the ability to switch to semi-auto with a none-too-shabby minimum damage means you won't be feeling left high and dry if you have to finish off an enemy from afar. The very high potential capacity means that you probably won't ever have to worry about inconveniently timed reloads either. With its quasi-automatic capabilities, the Glock even makes itself useful as a close-range assault weapon in the absence of a reasonable automatic. It's not really my cup of tea, or at least I didn't think it would be. If you know my tastes, you'll know that to a certain point I prefer harder-hitting and slower-firing weapons. And while I initially dismissed the G57 due to its half-hearted foray into being an automatic sidearm, boring design, and starting weapon status, I can't deny that it works. I wish I could put it between A and B tier, since that's where I think it belongs according to my standards. And while I appreciate it as a very good secondary that perfectly encapsulates the new design philosophy of this game's gun balance, I just really don't use it much. So I choose to put the G57 in B tier, but know that it could totally be an A on a good day. MP28. A semi-automatic 4-shot to reasonable sidearm ranges and a 5-shot to pretty much any other range, the MP28 seemingly acts as a less aggressive but more range-versatile gun. The prospect of having to land 4 shots in semi-auto even as close as point blank sounds less ideal than a burst fire 5-shot, but the TTK is actually faster than the Glock. Regardless though, the greater range is usually seen as the reason that the MP28 stands out, and there are a few things helping to accomplish a good ranged performance. For one thing, the muzzle velocity is not too special for this game, but it's higher than previous games would assign to a 4-shot sidearm, and higher than the Glock, but more importantly, the MP28 can mount magnified optics up to 2.5 power. With those magnified optics, this is the one sidearm in the game that feels like it offers simultaneously great rapidity and precision. At a higher fire rate than the fastest semi-autos of previous games and with fine recoil, especially for its good damage retention, it feels surprisingly easy to laser your foes. Not to mention the novelty of a carbine sidearm is not lost on me because of course, no novelty is ever lost on me, being a hipster and all. All that, plus the fact that this is the only 4-shot to get magnified optics, lands the MP28 in A tier. M44. The first revolver present in this game is something that was sadly below my expectations. As a revolver lover, I was hoping for something like the Gosser or Model 27 from previous games, but instead I was given this. A single action with one of the slowest fire rates ever seen on any sidearm in the series, as well as a downright disrespectful hipfire radius for a handgun. In return, it also has an absolutely insane per-shot damage for a secondary, able to 2-tap or 1-tap headshot out to a great range. But really that's not saying much due to the fire rate. The damage is impressive for a revolver, sure, but compared to what's honestly a more analogous weapon class, it's probably more appropriate to say that the M44 is like a very bad sniper rifle. Its muzzle velocity is a number of steps behind the best-in-class secondary, which is kind of insulting since this is the gun that needs it most. Sure, it's very neat to have up to a 4x magnification on a sidearm and the reload mechanics are very cool, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Mechanically, this seems like one of the least viable sidearms we see in the game. It relies on its headshots to be even remotely competitive with any other sidearm here, because on body shots, its highest TTK is worse than most of the other sidearms' lowest. But personally, I have to appreciate it for what it is. I like gimmick guns, especially when they subvert class rules. Just like how I might prefer a close-quarters oriented DMR, this sniper secondary gets pulled up pretty high from where it would lie in an objective tier list, on the strength of what it represents. A one-hit headshot up to 100 meters is something no other sidearm comes close to replicating. B tier. PF51. Now this is what I like to see. If your game is going to include a machine pistol, you might as well go all the way. It's not what most people would consider a pistol in the conventional sense at all. Especially with this fictional fully automatic fire, it's more like a stockless compact SMG. But choosing the Kel-Tec P50 as a base meant they could implement its 50-round magazine, giving you practically unprecedented shot output from a secondary, especially with that fire rate matching up to the high-end SMGs. That high output allowed them to create one of the weakest damage models conceivable, but I don't mind it at all, as any higher damage would likely have required nigh uncontrollable recoil, and probably would have been hard to balance even despite that, because you know people find their ways to get around such things. As it stands, the recoil is still quite out of proportion for its damage and fire rate by the standards of an SMG, though that's good because it's not supposed to be a full-blown primary. But this gun does a stellar job showcasing just how to scale back a high fire rate automatic weapon into being a unique and enjoyable secondary. That recoil is by no means unworkable for expected sidearm ranges, and the hipfire is usable but not too tight. I love extremes like this, and by nature of its automatic fire, the PF51 is consistent in close quarters, but in a game where secondaries often extend their utility to more impressive ranges, the fact that the PF51 does not means it can't quite break through into being one of my favorites. A tier. NVK P125. The NVK P125 has the same fire rate and almost the same damage as the MP28, just not falling to 6 shots, which is a pretty good start by my standards. It also sports the highest velocity of any sidearm, making shots easy to hit. Alright, that's pretty good. To top it off, this gun can also toggle to a 2-round hyperburst-like function, with very little time between the 2 shots at the cost of a delay between bursts, leading it to be similar to a revolver archetype at close enough ranges where you can guarantee both shots on target. But honestly, outside that range, semi-auto is better. That's a pretty nice gun, that is, and the recoil is no worse than the MP28 either. What the P125 has to trade for this, however, is its max ammo of only 19+1, the lowest max capacity of any gun in this archetype, but still a fortune's worth of bullets compared to previous games. And it's unable to mount magnified optics. A real shame since this gun would be absolutely one of the best for it, and the long mounting rail could allow for up to a 4x scope. This puts a limit on its theoretical strengths in practice and reeks of missed opportunity, but it's still quite a good gun, and not to mention the novelty of a bullpup pistol can't be ignored. I maintain that with the somewhat bloated nature of the 4-shot sidearms roster, and this pistol's seeming impression of power, that I probably would have preferred to see it go the route of something like a Mars automatic updated for this game. But as is, the burst fire toggle for an archetype switch is neato. A tier. Super 500. One of the rarest sidearm types, I am finally enlightened by the presence of a secondary shotgun, something I was never accustomed to in games before. By shotgun standards, the Super 500 is not a very prestigious example, but for a sidearm, it is majestic. It offers a surprisingly reliable one-shot kill to the body, and the fact that it has the worst ammo and the second worst fire rate of sidearms without nearly as much range as any other is not enough to keep this thing down, because it's got that one really strong point going for it. It's like a more extreme version of the Obrez pistol, sure, lacking its ability to perform at range, but unlike the Obrez, which can only barely get the job done and will fail to one-shot if you hit the lower body or limbs, something hard to account for, which makes its one-shot finicky. The Super 500 doesn't care where you hit, it's usually easier to hit, and it has a lot of damage to spare if you miss pellets. I'm someone who believes that sidearms can be lots of things, and don't just have to be your backup for when your primary needs a reload or enemies are too close, and that factors into how I appraise them. However, for most people I'd say the Super 500 is all you could probably ask for in a sidearm. If we're talking close-range defense, you'd be hard-pressed to beat this basically instant threat stopper. Consequently, this seems like a popular pick, and sometimes when you think you've got someone dead to rights, they'll whip out the Super 500 and put an end to you like that. If you can compose yourself to hit your shots right the first time, you're golden, but God help you if you can't. That's the design ethos, and I think reliance on spam fire is what keeps more people from using this thing, cause I honestly don't know what else would stop people from using it if they just keep sidearms for minimal range. For me, I feel the sidearm slot can always be a foil to your primary, and the Super 500 is the perfect counterbalance for a long-range loadout. And even aside from that, its substantial damage per shot makes it great for standing on its own and going on the offensive as well. S tier. BFP 50. Whereas the Super 500 is a good foil for a long-ranged primary, I'm tempted to say that the Desert Eagle is a good foil for a close-ranged primary, but that wouldn't necessarily be true, because the BFP 50 shouldn't be considered a backup to anything. It's basically its own primary weapon, a two-shot with an unheard-of combination of damage and fire rate. It's hard to understand why in a game that's supposed to be balanced, DICE added one pistol that stands out as seemingly objectively the best. Its recoil isn't unmanageable, it's got a higher capacity and faster reload than a revolver, it's got a normal hip fire so its two-shot is easy at short range, but the two-shot also lasts out to 50 meters, then it's a three-shot for the next 50 meters with a super high velocity so it's awesome at range too. It's got a magnification up to 4 times helping you exploit that, and it even one-taps to the head until 20 meters. The BFP 50 is easily recognized as the champion of sidearms. It's got something for everybody, which only a great weapon can claim. Anything you could want a sidearm for, whether you just use sidearms for close-up defense, if you like something that can finish off an injured enemy with reliability, or if you're a hand cannon connoisseur like me who wants to push the limits of handgun hunting, the Deagle has got you covered. I prayed for days like these. I only wish such stats came in a revolver-shaped package. What can I say? I'm biased. Still though, an easy S tier. Probably better than S tier if we're being honest. L9CZ. Here we have another 4-shot to kill sidearm, with the same max damage zone as the previous, but with some deficiencies in other areas. It has the lowest velocity and the worst range damage drop-off of the 4 shots, falling to 7 hits to kill at the furthest, while firing slower than the MP28 and P125 as well. Additionally, it has few and very limited optics, all unmagnified. It lacks a gimmick compared to the previous two, and its magazine extension doesn't change the model of the mag. Now, one could argue that a sidearm is meant for close range, and if you're using this gun within 30 meters, you're not losing much of anything at all. But I've yet to find an upshot to contrast these comparative nerfs, though there is something. I can't exactly put my finger on what it is, but using the L9CZ is oddly relaxed and simple feeling. I'm sure part of that is down to the fast reload times, but otherwise I can't figure it out, because the recoil is nothing special. Because of how this gun feels to use, it ranks surprisingly high compared to where I thought I'd put it, but I think you'll find that's not a very high bar. Due to being the most boring and seemingly statistically worst 4-shot 2042 sidearm, I use this thing so rarely, there's just no intrigue for me. But it's not too uncommon to see in the hands of other players, so maybe there's something that the stats I have available aren't telling me, or maybe it's just mass hysteria. C tier. M1911. For a while I have held a pretty spiteful position on this M1911. It stands as the only 3-shot to kill sidearm, but it's quite lacking due to the fact that it wasn't made from the ground up for 2042. Like all the following vault secondaries, it has virtually no customization, meaning one of the most beneficial things you can do for a sidearm, attaching so much as a reflex sight, is simply not possible, and often the customization that is there on vault sidearms is more of a hindrance than a help. It has an insultingly low velocity, especially for this game, and its damage doesn't even have a 4-shot zone, skipping right from 3 to 5, meaning that outside of its 3-shot zone, this thing is useless what with its higher recoil and aforementioned super low velocity. All of these are cons that almost certainly would have been remedied by a 2042 3-shot secondary, but instead this is what we get. By adding this gun, they could write off the prospect of having to make at least one dedicated 3-shot that fits into the balance, as has been tradition for years. And even if they were never going to add one regardless, this is a pretty sucky alternative. But it's not useless. Being that this is the only one of its kind, it does have its own place in the gameplay. While any work beyond the 3-shot zone is pretty much impossible, the size of that zone itself is pretty generous. Additionally, with magazines up to a capacity of 17+1, you can get up to 6 kills just with body shots before needing to reload. At a fire rate higher than the 1911s of previous games, it has a faster time to kill than the 4-shots, but with its higher damage and lower fire rate, it invites more control and less spam firing. When you get within hip fire range of your enemies, it feels surprisingly relaxed to go from person to person netting kills. It may not have the range or acceptable ADS of the 4-shots and 2-shots that flank it, but close up this middle ground feels just right. Still don't love it though. C tier. MP412 Rex. It pains me to speak ill of this weapon that I might have liked in any other context, but the fact that the Desert Eagle exists in this game, is as godlike as it is, and occupies the same role as this gun, means I have a really hard time finding reasons to use the Rex. With longer reloads, less ammo, lower velocity, and a slightly worse damage than the high-power BFP-50 with absolutely zero customization, the Rex's small advantages are completely unconvincing. Aside from being designed with poor visibility, I can't really put my finger on why, but I find these sights so hard to use, especially with the way they move when you fire. Despite a great velocity for this class, it seems like I can almost never lead my shots with this thing, and so I struggle with moving targets at any notable distance. Using hip fire on the Rex is pretty solid, but it's a shame that that's about all I can say for a gun whose damage model is theoretically really good for range, even being able to one-tap headshot to 50 meters. That doesn't really matter when I feel the need to close the distance before I even start aiming at slow-moving enemies. I used to like this gun back when it was the only one of its kind, but the BFP-50 just dominates this thing's niche. If you want a 2-shot that fires faster, the BFP's close combat ammo is right there for you, putting out an even better TTK than the Rex with 50% more loaded ammo. Even the fact that this is a revolver isn't enough for me to take it on style. I kind of don't like the way it looks. My positions on the M1911 and MP412 Rex have surprisingly swapped. While they both leave much to be desired, at least the 1911 is doing something unique for this game and feels easier to use. So I can't believe I'm doing this, but D tier. M93R. Another machine pistol firing in semi-auto or burst. I really don't have much to say about the M93R other than that I find it hard to use, and it's really no wonder why. I have yet to see a compelling reason to consider this gun as anything but a far worse version of the G57. It's got the same fire rates, higher recoil, smaller magazines, the expected dismal level of customization found on Vault's sidearms, and much worse damage. By 30 meters, the M93R is down to a 7-shot kill and the Glock is still sitting at a 5-shot. I mean, it never even drops to a 7-shot kill. Meanwhile, the Beretta drops as low as 9. I know these sidearms are rarely used outside of close quarters anyway, but it illustrates how comparatively shit this burst fire machine pistol is. Seriously, the only thing that this gun does better than the Glock as far as I can tell, is that it has a bit higher bullet velocity. Doesn't matter a bit though with the recoil and lack of customization, meaning your only sight picture is an imprecise iron sight that's constantly moving. Also, I hate using it. I get my worst performances with this sidearm by far. Because I consider it a straight downgrade from something that already exists and I don't even like that much, the M93R goes in F tier. MP443. By my reckoning, the MP443 is just a worse version of a gun that I'm definitely already not fond of, the L9CZ. It has some downsides in common, like the slower fire rate cap and low minimum damage. While it may sport a higher end velocity for the 4-shot sidearms and has slower long-range damage drop-off, it has the shortest 4-shot zone of all of them, a third shorter than the rest. Since the category of 4-shot semi-automatic pistols is robustly filled out in this game, it's all too easy to see the way that this Vault weapon falls comparatively short. Not only does it lack meaningful customization, but its recoil is unnecessarily way higher than any similar weapon. Even if it weren't for the lack of customization dealing a major blow to this gun, it just doesn't statistically fit at all, and when you have 3 other examples of this archetype to work with, it's obvious. Aside from the decent bullet velocity, which is hard to take advantage of with iron sights and harsh recoil animations, the only other positive trade-off I can conceive is that it has the highest mag capacity for these guns at 27 rounds, but the MP28 isn't far behind at 25 rounds. An embarrassing example of a pistol in my opinion, but it can do the job in close range and at least isn't diffed in all ways like the M93R. E tier. Let's review before we move on, shall we? I think it will help to put things in perspective and context to discuss all of the guns in relation to each other like this. You can see my bias for gimmicks at work. The PF51, M44, and Super 500 all garner higher placements based on their uniqueness, with the latter being the most unique and also the most decisive short ranger. Perfect for a sidearm. Perfect for S tier. Similarly, the BFP50 has mutant strength and is practically a flawless gun. The MP28 is rapid but precise and ranged. The P125 lacks its capacity or attachments but makes up for it with a playstyle-altering burst. While the M44 is not a very good gun that's brought up by being quite interesting, the G57 is a very good gun that's brought down by being quite uninteresting. Then you have the boring but serviceable L9CZ, compelling but flawed 1911, and from there on its overshadowed guns. To me, being a weak repeat doesn't mean you're slightly worse than the original, it means you're pointless. Poor Rex can't stand up to the transcendent Deagle, the MP443 is a mostly worse version of a boring weapon, and the M93R is a certainly worse version of a boring weapon. As you can see, Vault guns generally tend to be shoe-ins for the bottom tiers. Meanwhile, everything else that's well-rounded stats-wise and for the most part distinct gets to populate the upper tiers. The lack of modularity and a lack of the range as generally seen on base 2042 weapons helps guarantee that these Vaulties really can't stand on equal footing. At least other classes have better Vault gun implementation, to varying degrees. Alright, now on to SMGs. Oh god damn it, I rhymed on accident. PBX-45. On pretty much all of the first-in-class primary weapons, tons of pertinent modifications means more points in my book. Even if a gun doesn't totally match up to my preferred playstyles, I must give high marks for packing more functionality into a single weapon. Just like how I awarded higher positions to Battlefield 1 guns with more consequential variants. Except here it's even better because you can swap in the field. The PBX-45 may have higher fire rates than I customarily use in the previous games, the per-shot recoil is a bit higher than it could be for this game, and the high-power magazine combines just enough of a low damage, low fire rate, and low velocity to seem a tad weak, but in practice it's given me great ranged results for an SMG. Indeed, the gun always seems to be comfortable to use, and the fact that it can change itself so vastly with ammo types and extended barrel means that the PBX is really not tied down to any submachine gun niche. It is the very best at dipping into all of them. And despite having default fire rates that I would consider high compared to BFV, the PBX is actually a total moderate for SMGs in this game, and more or less the only one. So yeah, I'll take that. S tier. PP29. Bringing significant power for an SMG right off the bat, even the weakest ammo type sports a substantial 4-shot zone. Then the strongest ammo has a minimum damage of 18, only needing 6 shots at max range. You're really telling me this is a submachine gun? To be fair, this glamorous model is the best this class gets, and it has its statistical offset of course. First of all, she be kickin'. The recoil is punchy on this one, and as you can probably expect, fire rate is low. I like low fire rates on automatics, likely due to some underlying hipster typal disorder, but also because it can help me rein in the recoil, and with extended barrel the fire rate drops below 600, which is practically a snail's pace in this game, but hell, I admire that. The PP29 may lack underbarrel attachments, but that's because it's too busy using massive magazines that are actually fast to reload despite the perceived clumsiness of a helical drum. I am most certainly a fan of taking an SMG to a slow and strong extreme, but the recoil is significant even for that, and SMGs aren't exactly primed for long-range use even when you specialize them this hard. I still admire it though. A tier. MP9. What's this you're giving me? A bulky machine pistol with a stock? Looks like a recipe for weakness and uncontrollability. Not my cup of tea. But looks can be deceiving. I may not have always been based, but I got over my poor impression of this gun as a tiny fast firer a long time ago. High fire rate guns in this game, and especially SMGs, are often balanced to have more comfortable recoil with lower damage. As controllable as they are, guns like this are still viable for range, which would usually be one of my chief concerns. You need to land more shots, but they're proportionally faster and easier to hit. A 4x scope doesn't even feel nonsensical. The MP9 also offers the first fully suppressed build of this game, combining subsonic ammo and heavy suppressors to give you a major edge by depriving enemies of information from sound, bullet tracers, and spotting blips. What's more, subsonic ammo is the strongest MP9 ammo type, very good for SMGs in general, especially at this fire rate, and the Type 4 suppressor doesn't even hamper the shots to kill until 75 meters. The MP9 is one of my favorites due to that build alone. S tier. This game finally did it to me. I'm a high fire rate scrub now. K30. Well, I know what I just said, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I have to give props for making an SMG with a fire rate of over 1200 rounds per minute a reasonable weapon. It pairs that insane fire rate with a none too shabby recoil, so it feels just fine to use, but then makes the max damage an absolutely minimal 6-shot to kill model, so it's balanced. It may have a high power option with a 30-round magazine, but I don't really consider it legitimate, as the gun's standard and high power are really just close combat and standard respectively, with the name only justified by higher muzzle velocities. So even on your so-called high power option, the K30 is a short ranger through and through. That's something that holds it back for me. As much as I admire how well done the concept of maximum fire short range is, the concept itself is one of my least preferred playstyles. And even despite that insane cyclic rate, the TTK is not as quick as some slower firing guns with their higher max damage, such as certain configurations of the 4-shot PBX, or the next gun which is a 5-shot but can fire very fast as far as 5 shots go. A full suppression build is always nice to have, but forcing low damage and an abnormally low muzzle velocity on a gun that already struggles with range means that this is one of the worst examples. So the K30 doesn't seem to offer much of anything besides its gimmick. D tier. AC9. Initially, I did not have much reason to appreciate the AC9 as another extreme fire rate SMG, but I have to begrudgingly admit that the AC9 has become my favorite submachine gun for absolute close range. Something I didn't think I would really desire. Usually I stick with slower and longer ranged weapons and just make do with the less than optimal short range performance. You know, emphasis on overall range versatility and all. But close range has practically never felt as good as it does with the AC9. Pretty much the reason that the K30 is in D tier despite the fact that it's a fine weapon and has a fully subsonic build is because the AC9 just feels like a much better version to me. It's got better max damage and range on its comparable ammo types while having the same minimal per shot recoil at a lower fire rate, so it's super smooth. And even with that lower fire rate, it still floats around 1000 rounds per minute, and with a higher max damage, as I said, it has a faster TTK than the K30. So yeah, I found that I like this thing a lot more than I thought I would. Probably partially because there's less reason to hate high fire rate guns in this game than there was in the last 2 games, since they're not so meta-dominating. With that said, a close range focus is still far from my favorite way to play, and with its ammo types being very similar to each other and not allowing for any full suppression builds, the AC9 is not offering up much variety, so I'm putting it in B tier. SCZ3. The SCZ3 tries to blend the PBX-45 and MP9. At default, it has a high fire rate and 5-shot max damage like the MP9, and even features a fully suppressed build, but it has better damage retention at range and can lower its fire rate much further, with the help of high power ammo and extended barrel like the PBX. The problem is that I am already quite fond of the MP9 and PBX-45 as they are, and the SCZ3 does not incorporate the elements I actually like. For example, if you want to go fully suppressed, the subsonic ammo is slower firing and weaker in close range even on its own. And when I say close range here, I mean the first 50 meters, so that's pretty significant to a submachine gun. But you're also forced to use a heavy suppressor with a bigger damage reduction, leading to a damage as bad as the fully suppressed K30 build, also to 50 meters. A build which fires an entire 46% faster. To only be competitive past 50 meters ain't enough for an SMG suppressed build. And then the Scorpion generally isn't as modular as the PBX, so it can't really surpass that either. It's a fine gun though, cause it has some good capabilities and at least it offers high power and extended barrel, and even a weak fully suppressed build is still worth something to me. C tier. P90. I said in my gun guide video that the P90 is one of my preferred high fire rate submachine guns. And while it's true that I appreciate its status as an iconic vault weapon that feels oddly good to use, I don't really think I can say that I outright prefer it anymore. With the MP9 offering a substantially satisfying full suppression build, and the AC9 dominating the high fire rate close range game, the P90 technically doesn't have much. Its damage and recoil are nothing special compared to other guns at the same fire rate, and it's not even the only one to get a 50-round magazine. What can definitely be said for the P90 is that it has very favorable hipfire behavior, which is strange. I didn't think guns within the same class varied much as far as hipfire goes, but the P90's stays narrow while firing and snaps shut like a trap once you release the trigger. Of course, in this game even a 900 RPM submachine gun can be so much more than a short-ranged weapon, so good hipfire isn't necessarily enough for me, but perhaps it helps explain part of why the handling feels good. Even in aimed fire the gun feels smooth, but that's actually strangely common for these high fire rate SMGs. Damn it, I don't know, I just like it. Enough trying to justify myself. B tier. AKS-74U. The Krinkov does very well for a vault weapon, because despite lesser customizability and lack of various damage models through ammo types which all vault guns have to endure, its base stats don't feel like they've taken on any limitations as compared to pretty much every vault gun that's come before it. On the contrary, the AKS takes an already great model, the high-powered PP-29, and builds on top of it. With the same slow fire rate and same fantastic damage model, only weaker past 100 meters, that still makes it equal to the best SMG per shot damage 90% of the time. And while its magazine is smaller, the defining upside of the AKS-74U is its good recoil control, standing in stark contrast to the aggressively kicking PP-29. Given that vault guns can only have one model for damage, fire rate, and recoil each, this is about the best start that you could get. Where it falls apart is the lacking customization, even for a vault gun, and the fact that, harsh recoiling as it is, the longer range and swath of options on the P20, including a longer barrel to satisfy my slow fire rate desires, keep it elevated above the AKS. B tier. PP-2000. The PP-2000 has the same lower fire rate as the AKS-74U, and like it has a damage model similar to the PP-29, except this time it's mostly based on the weaker standard ammunition. This means its damage falls off more quickly at 50 meters and further, but where the PP-2000's damage differs is that its 4-shot zone actually lasts to 40 meters. That's the best max damage of all SMGs. An SMG that starts off very strong but drops off more dramatically is already a good concept, but for one thing, the range damage ain't even bad. It may look lacking compared to the AKS or PP-29's high power, but past your formidable max damage range the zones are the same as the high power SCZ-3, pretty good for an SMG. But that's not even the thing that makes this gun. What makes it is its crazy low recoil, lower than any comparable gun by far. Combined with that slow fire rate, you really won't struggle to get your shots on target, and with 44-round magazines you'll feel plenty safe, whether you're exploiting that unreasonable 4-shot range or handily dealing with the threats outside of it thanks to better than average performance. The PP-2000 is my ideal standalone submachine gun, so despite being a vault gun, it still gets S tier. With guns getting a lot more modular in primary weapons, we see the emergence of my adoration for adaptable weapons. The PBX is carried almost solely by how versatile it is, but it also helps that it's on the side of SMG stats that I actually like, just barely eking into the slower and stronger half. This modularity is also why the SCZ-3, as disinteresting as it may be to me, doesn't find itself lower. The PP-29 is quite strong and mildly customizable, but a little too harsh on the handling for my tastes. The PP-2000 on the other hand combines my favorite values of low fire rate, very low recoil, and high damage at least to mid-range, proving that being a vault gun doesn't mean you can't be a favorite. The AKS-74U, better at range but worse handling, is nonetheless a more comfortable but limited alternative to the PP-29. A good but not special vault gun, just like the P90, a poster child for respectable high fire rate guns. Not quite to the same degree as the MP9 though, whose fully suppressed build is unpredictably strong and eminently fun. The AC9 is maddeningly fast but too good on recoil to ignore, and the K30 tries to do the same, but takes too many steps in the opposite direction of my tastes, redeemed slightly by its subsonic build. As you can see, from here on out anything lower than D tier is going to be rare, because there aren't many guns that I can say don't give me value from time to time. Alright, let's move on to assault rifles. M5A3. The M5 is the first gun that displays the maximum range of fire rate modularity, since it has all of the consequential ammo types, shortened barrel, and extended barrel. I appreciate such weapons and their ability to swiftly and dramatically change in the field, and whatever RPM range you prefer, you can find it on the M5A3. This is an excellent trait to have in my book, but where it starts falling apart for me is that even at the low fire rate of 600 RPM, you have no 4-shot kill. The stronger ammo types only close up the gap by increasing minimum damage, never making you more powerful in close range. So increasing power and ammo type is for range extension only. Which, I like extending my range, don't get me wrong. The minuscule damage differential of high power is admirable with good recoil and scopes available, but that just means the M5 is a generally low damage per shot gun, and its appearance of modularity can seem superficial compared to others, putting it in conflict with my tastes. One would imagine that 20 rounds at 600 RPM would take less than 5 shots at point blank, but the low damage philosophy also means we can swing to almost 1000 RPM on the same gun, so I can dig it. A tier. AM-40. This is sort of the SMG LARPer of the assault rifle class. It's small and has got a fast fire rate and low end damage. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, about the best thing that the AM-40 does over other ARs is that it has pretty fast reloads. Otherwise, later guns have both better damage and better recoil for this same fire rate. And while there is a standard and high power ammo type choice, the differences between them do not seem very significant. And while high power technically has a zone where it can 4-shot, it's such a short range for this game that I consider the AM-40 a 5-shot weapon through and through. And to borrow my words from the previous video, in the event that an enemy is close enough to die in 4 shots, I consider that a luck-based benefit, like random crits. You can't rely on it, and this isn't the only gun whose absolute max damage is a 4-shot with a range of only 9 or, God forbid, 4 meters. The AM-40 does often in use feel like a dandy little carbine, but from a stat angle it certainly seems to be missing something. C tier. AK-24. Featuring high damage and low fire rates, the AK-24 starts off on the right track, but it's one of fully 4 guns that have the same fire rates and damage philosophy, and of them it has the worst damage on its high power setup. It may have extended barrel for maximizing the chugga-chugga slow fire rate factor, even slower than the PP-29, which me likey, but that's common for these guns. In fact, the AK has little in the way of quirks or interesting features, making it the most boring heavy AR. Tragically, it seems that the only thing that the AK-24 does well in comparison to the other strong and slow assault rifles is that it has a generous 50-round standard ammunition magazine. That's actually a larger capacity than any other AR can achieve, so perhaps it can be seen as the best of the slow ARs in their more moderate setups. But I don't want a moderate setup. If I did, I'd use a moderate AR, not one that's supposed to be in the strongest category. Maybe I should look into changing my default setup to take advantage of that though, cause instinctively I set these strong ARs to their slowest and most powerful setting, but I consider all of the others better on that front. Favorable concept according to my tastes, bad execution in a crowded archetype. C tier. SFAR MGL. Just like the AK, the SCAR is powerful and ponderous. It reduces underbarrel choice to a few grenades only, but its damage is a robust improvement. Standard has a much more usable 4-shot zone, and high power can 4-shot all the way out to 50 meters, leaving everything past that a 5-shot zone. A gargantuan max damage range and barely any drop-off at all. This is the best AR damage model. And not only that, it comes in 40-round magazines. You might be expecting a recoil trade-off, but the 4 ARs of this type actually have pretty consistent recoil, and the AK and SFAR are especially hard to distinguish. This gun might not have any frills or gimmicks, but with the best damage and the highest capacity for high power, it is specifically the greatest at the slow and strong extreme for assault rifles. Complete with my favorite magnified optics, it plays best to the special purpose implicit in this slow fire rate archetype, and it's an archetype I adore. S tier. AC-42. The best way to do a gun that can fire in burst but not full auto is to do it like this. Low recoil and high-end damage enforce a capability out to medium range, but this gun also proves that high cyclic rates are perfect for bursts. Burst fire ensures that you don't fire more shots than necessary with such a fast output, and the burst benefits by being so fast that your 3 shots feel like a single impulse, and not even a challenging one, since the recoil was calibrated accordingly. You don't feel the need to micromanage every shot in the burst like you might have to with some others. What's the use of high power and extended barrel then? With high power offering low capacity with a little damage benefit in burst viable ranges and a lower cyclic rate worsening the feeling of the burst, these attachments actually seem made for a semi-auto build. With recoil so low and fast velocities, that high-end AR damage really doesn't feel bad as a marksman's carbine. And with high power damage improvements only kicking in past 75 meters, it really seems like this was the intention. Then there's a fully suppressed build for a weaker but more tactically advantageous version of the standard burst play. All told, it's nice. A tier. RM68. The RM68 ratchets up the gimmicks for the slow, strong assault rifles. With the default suppressor that doesn't reduce velocity or damage, shortened barrel version thereof, and permanently canted sights all being unique features, it's easy to be drawn to a gun with so many things you can't get anywhere else. Throw on a seemingly lower degree of recoil and a close combat ammo type combining with the shortened barrel to make this thing not very slow at all, and now I've got statistical reasons to like this thing too. All of its ammo types have big differences and distinct roles, which can't be said of many guns which end up with small damage type changes. Of the Beefcake ARs, this one's standard ammo is the most valid. It's the strongest one, a significant step up from close combat and stronger than the AK's high power even. It can also get a 30-round capacity, which is a good reprieve from the fact that the RM68 has the lowest high power capacity at 20 rounds. High power damage is close to the SFAR, so wonderful, but with its low capacity and dismal total ammo, it doesn't inspire the same confidence in what's supposed to be this archetype's strongest suit. It's very good, but not my favorite, so A tier. GEW46. ARs don't have much in between the fast-firing 5 shots and the slow and steady 4 shots, but the G46 is a certified moderate. Its standard ammo sits on the faster end with a simple and clean damage model that's mostly a 5 or 6 shot with an itty-bitty 4-shot zone up close, an improvement over the fast ARs but on the lower end of their shot output. Then high power takes the maximum AK damage, the lowest maximum of the slow and steadies but still very admirable, and speeds it up. On top of that, the recoil of these ammo types is low compared to the guns they mirror. There's even extended barrel if you tend to enjoy the slower feel like me. Despite all this, for some reason, and maybe it's folly on my part, I haven't really felt the urge to use the G46 lately. I've been kind of bored of it. The only possible cons I can think of at this time are that it lacks a lot of expected customization options, including higher magnification and underbarrel stuff, and just the fact that it's not capable of being stronger. But I mean, it can't be. That makes sense because it's a middle ground, best of both worlds kind of gun. But I have a preference for the extremes, the far ends, gimmicks. In-betweeners get lost in the noise. It may be unfair because of the objective value I've realized this gun has, but for how little I've used it, I consider the G46 a personal B tier. VHX D3. Alright, I gotta admit it, the VHX has grown on me. While being a high fire rate weapon, it doesn't manage to have the same comfy recoil of the 900 RPM submachine guns, which was my reason for ultimately accepting them. But to start with, compared to the AM40, the VHX has got better damage at the same fire rate and recoil, so that's already a leg up even if it's a class of weapon I wouldn't normally care for. The adaptability offered by high-power ammo and extended barrel may not be as impactful as fully modular ARs, but it's still an impact, and gives me a reason to use a scope on this gun. The fully suppressed build may force this gun into a 6-shot max damage, but offering a full suppression build is a good thing, and it's still a step up damage-wise from the SCZ3 and K30 suppressed builds, so it doesn't feel super weak. This gun has got features. Maybe they're not as robust as when they're seen on some other guns, but not every gun even gets to have them in the first place, and when you combine them with a weapon that has surprisingly high damage for its fire rate, I suppose I can overlook some high recoil. B tier. AK-5C. A super modular weapon with tons of mags, heavy barrel, grenade launchers, and a heavy suppressor, that's a great start on any gun. But the fact that these features are present on a slow and strong archetype AR means that this game has basically fulfilled my deepest carnal desires. Extended barrel is already an expected mainstay on these heavy ARs, but heavy barrel being a more accurate version plays exactly to what I want in this kind of modification. With the significant differences between close combat and high power, as well as the availability of a fully suppressed build with subsonic, being the strongest such build in the game aside from literal bolt actions, there's no other way to go but using these 3 mags. You can achieve 3 pretty different playstyles at once. The close combat and subsonic both have the consistent damage of the M5's high power, one faster with more ammo and very controllable, and the other super sneaky, which I always consider a noticeable edge, especially on a gun like this that has more range. Then high power has formidable 4 and 5 shot zones, with damage barely below this far, only falling behind at sniping range, so it's practically on par with the best in that aspect too. This is my do-everything AR. S tier. M16A3 and M416. I'm getting these two out of the way together because they just have so much in common that it would save time to do so without losing much detail. This won't be the last time. Thanks, Vault Guns! Something else to mention is, it doesn't really feel like a problem on SMGs, but starting with assault rifles, vault weapons so often feel like they just have horrible recoil impulses. It's often visually maddening, even if the objective recoil amount isn't that bad. Anyhow, the M16 and M416 have the same damage as the high-power M5A3, so it's a consistent model with low max damage but great for range, and can come in 40-round magazines, but it doesn't really feel as good to use. The M16 has a higher muzzle velocity and fires faster but has more recoil than the M416. The M16 has more robust barrel options, but the M416 has better optics. Worst of all, they are extremely visually similar and of an overplayed design. My hipster sensibilities are repulsed. Normally these would be quite unremarkable to me, but these are the only two guns that can mount the M26 mass underbarrel shotgun, which is unironically I think my favorite shotgun in the entire game. With buckshot, it outputs massive damage at a manageable spread with a detachable magazine reload and decent ammunition reserve, all at the cost of a hulking fire rate. While unwieldy, I am in awe of its power. It's almost brought down by the fact that it's attached to a couple of assault rifles that I don't really care for. But I can't think of it that way. The ARs are the weapons I'm rating after all. They're fine on their own, but wouldn't be to my tastes if not for the shotgun. With the M416 being easier to control given its slightly lower recoil and fire rate, I'll be putting it in A tier, and the M16A3 in B tier. ACWR. The ACWR is like a good vault version of the GEW46. It's got the same fire rate and 4-shot range, but a shorter 5-shot range than the high power, still with high minimum damage and noticeably lower recoil with a higher possible magazine capacity. That's some pretty dang good base stats right out of the gate, but as a vault weapon of course the pros stop there. Without ammo type customization, there's no way to put a spin on your stats as needed. And while optics are good, the other modification axes are not. While it's most similar to a weapon that I find a tad drab even with full 2042 customization, I respect the ACWR for being as good on its face as it is. It's still on the slower and stronger side, and is the most powerful vault AR. Also, as a low recoil junkie, that upside carries some extra weight in my book, so B tier. A91. The A91 is also pretty similar to a 2042 weapon, the standard ammo VHX D3. It's a bullpup with the same damage and magazine sizes, though it has a lower muzzle velocity and fire rate. In turn, its recoil is lower. So this seems pretty good, right? It's an almost identical story to the ACWR, which I like. The difference is, this is a base that I don't appreciate as much, higher fire rate and lower damage. What the VHX had going for it was its high power, long barrel, and suppression build through the attachments, which really brought in stuff that I liked to a gun that I otherwise wouldn't. The A91 doesn't do that, and I also think it's the ugliest assault rifle. It's just very unremarkable to me, but as a gun it functionally has nothing wrong with it, and a reduced recoil alternative will always have some value to me. D tier. MTAR-21. Another high fire rate vault AR, huh? Probably not gonna get much attention from me, right? Contrary to what you might expect though, this is a gun that feels great to use. It may pull unexpectedly hard to the left, but its vertical recoil is much better than the standard VHX with slightly better damage at the same fire rate. As long as you're fine with being bound to it, if you're a fan of this model with its high aggression and not at all lacking damage, the MTAR seems like the best handling example, just like the AKS is to the PP29. As you know, these high fire rate guns don't usually agree with me, but a significant recoil reduction is the best thing to get me to change my tune, as it allows for easier use against distant targets what with your point of aim not getting away from you so quickly. While its customization is poor, especially in comparison to the solid panel of options seen on the VHX, the only other 900 RPM AR I like using, recoil control really is one of my most sought after traits, so I kind of appraise them equally. B tier. AEK 971. I'll try not to waste too much time here cause there's not much to say. I know people like the AEK 971 and it's largely because of nostalgia for how good it was in Battlefield 3, but with slightly worse damage than the MTAR and disgustingly worse recoil at the same 900 RPM fire rate, I do not see the fucking point. It may have really good customization, but it's got some of the worst per shot recoil of ARs at the highest fire rate. It's just not fun to use without a bipod unless you're working with short range only, which most fast guns, especially the MTAR, seem handily better at. Christ, it even has slower reloads. Please find something statistically to be better at. As with all guns, it works, but give me a reason when there are already so many fast ARs, and the MTAR's recoil control vastly outweighs the AEK's customizability options. E tier. AN-94. The AN-94 is such a strange specimen of a weapon. It's given multiple things that no other gun in all-out warfare gets, such as a heavy barrel on a vault weapon, a flash hider, a 7x scope, a maxed out muzzle velocity, and a burst fire with a different cyclic rate than full auto. But almost as baffling as what the gun does get is what it doesn't get, like an extended magazine, the ability to tap fire in full auto, or, stats that make any fucking sense. With a smolderingly low fire rate, which as you know I can definitely appreciate, this gun seems like it was supposed to have great damage, but it doesn't. It may kill in 4 shots to 20 meters, but otherwise it is as weak as middle ground ARs like the standard ammo G46 and high power VHX D3 in the mid-range, and even weaker than them at max range, contradicting the long-range implications hinted by the uniquely high magnification optic and super fast velocity. Not to mention, of course, those guns fire quite a bit faster. Alright, so then it must have very low recoil, right? Nope, it doesn't have that either. As a matter of fact, its vertical recoil is so high, it's just about the worst per shot of any AR, not nearly justified by the damage or fire rate. The hyperburst and its strange advantageous properties seem to be the only explanation. Even if the stats still fall short, I guess they just don't know what to do for a gun whose hyperburst has a faster overall shot output than the full auto and only about the same recoil as a single shot in semi-auto. The only other flowers I can give the AN-94 are that its horizontal recoil seems minimal, making the harsh vertical jumps at least predictable, and that the hipfire narrows substantially when stationary versus moving. Just like with the P90, it's a completely out-of-the-blue hipfire quirk that has me questioning my understanding of what's possible with these weapons, as everything else follows a consistent pattern that I thought was set in stone. Anyhow, I don't like the way it gets things done at all, but I have to put some respect on the hyperburst and the other things the AN-94 does utterly differently from every other gun. D tier. Alright, review time. ARs, bringing 4 guns from my favorite type of automatic weapons, comes with perks and drawbacks. Situated comfortably at the top are 2 of them, the SFAR best at its slow-firing high-damage application, with the highest damage and capacity, and the AK-5C having top-tier modularity and a hella strong fully suppressed build. The RM68 has interesting features but no standout stats, and the AK-24 has none of the intrigue and perks of the other 3, but it's a functional example of a good trope. The AM40 it's situated next to is similar, lacking something but functioning just fine as a fast gun nonetheless. Of our other fast guns, the M5A3 has almost everything for modularity, too bad I'm such a stickler for damage, and the VHX D3 gets flexibility to a lesser degree, but has a more assertive damage output and flawed but present suppressed build. The MTAR is a vault weapon, but it makes 900 RPM feel so good with even better damage, whereas the overshadowed AEK-971 with its atrocious handling leaves me no reason to use it. Without perks, these fast guns are nothing to me. For the in-betweeners, we have the Gewehr 46 and ACWR. Very similar and of good stock, the G46 customizable but a bit boring, and the ACWR lacking customization but with a better capacity and recoil. The A91 is technically not doing anything wrong, I like its controllability but it's on the weaker and faster side, and worst of all, downright ugly. Then there's the special cases, the M16 and M416, which feel meta okay to use on their own, but they come attached to my favorite shotgun in the game, so they get high marks, with the M16 lower based on my taste for fire rate and controllability. The AC42 has no full auto, but makes up for that with how good its different builds are for burst, semi-auto, and full suppression. Then there's the AN-94. Poor bastard. Some genuinely good and interesting things on a genuinely bad gun. Oh well, let's talk about Hey viewer, sorry to bother you, but I wanted to let you know that I have a Patreon page, and I want you to at least consider checking it out. Donors help keep this channel sustainable, and they also get some perks in return. The $1 contributor tier comes with donor credits in the video and early access to my content. The $5 producer tier also unlocks extra behind-the-scenes videos, as well as the ability to vote on certain polls. And the $10 commissioner tier gets all that, plus the ability to make me say stuff like this and do whatever you want with it. Scotland is not a real country! You are an Englishman with a dress! And lastly, never forget that even if you don't donate, your viewership is always appreciated. LCMG. The LCMG might be damn near my favorite conventional weapon in the entire game, and that's because it's a first slot heavily customizable starting weapon and a low fire rate beast. One of my favorite SMG damage models, the high power PBX, you can get that on close combat, 200 rounds. My favorite AR damage, the maxed out Scar, you've got that on high power, with a fire rate as low as 475? Now the recoil may get pretty harsh, but at a fire rate like that, who cares? Aside from the innate sensual satisfaction, a low RPM also provides a slow rate of accuracy loss and the ability to easily realign after recoil. The LCMG is the most powerful machine gun, and it's the slowest, especially with long barrel, but it can also get shortened barrel, so your TTK can objectively get pretty fast. And it has unusually high muzzle velocity, and it's the only MG to get the master key. S tier, man. No debate. Avances. Gotta hand it to the Avances, it's a pretty dang good gun. On a hipster basis, I don't want to be nice to it, but it's got too many things that I like. Its damage models sport long 5-shot max damage zones with a 6-shot minimum like the high-power M5A3, a paragon of consistent automatic weapon damage. It can get such rounds in a 200 cartridge belt, it has unusually low recoil, and can use extended barrel. Now that does cause it to run up against some of the same gripes I had with the M5, where the fire rate can be as low as 600 RPM still with no 4-shot max damage, but I still use long barrel for the love of the game. With an option for a 6x scope, exclusive among LMGs, the Avances is a long-range beam mounted up on a bipod, and a controllable fighting weapon for closer ranges without extended barrel. A tier. PKP BP. Seemingly the entire balance of the Bullpup PKP is predicated on its speed, despite the fact that it's really nothing special in that regard. It's the fastest firing of the light machine guns, and that seems to be about all it gets. Its damage is the weakest of this class, though that's usually expected for fast guns, but that goes hand in hand with high recoil. Now, guns in this game have done 900 RPM, low damage, and low recoil before. For how quickly the damage of standard ammo drops off, you'd expect better handling. High power at least has the long 5-shot zone more typical of normal SMGs, as well as a 200 round capacity, making it the strongest pick in my opinion, and while it falls to a 7-shot kill, that's only a concern for longer ranges. It's still, practically by default, the best LMG damage available for this fire rate, and with a massive capacity and available bipod, the PKP isn't too bad until it hits its 7-shot range. You're just relying on increased shot output while coping with worse recoil, which seems normal enough. It's not like you're getting much for alternatives, but since its stats limit its range and it's not as comfortable to use, the PKP gets C tier. RPT-31. The RPT seems to be the second most modular LMG behind the LCMG. It is the only one that has shortened barrel, and with that the fire rate differences between high power and standard can create a pretty big swing, which is something we're not really seeing on the other MGs. It's adaptable, and that helps me forgive its damage, which disappoints in some small areas. Standard's slightly weaker than the high-powered PKP and only able to match its speed with shortened barrel, nonetheless has greatly reduced recoil, fixing my biggest gripe with that gun. It feels good to use, just like high power, which is granted a nice 4-shot max damage zone, rare for MGs, but it also suffers from a 7-shot minimum, also rare for MGs, especially given how low the RPM can be. It's a more specialized and less consistent high-power damage, but it gets 200-round belts, a target scope, and honestly, I just like to use it regardless. Fire rate is enjoyable and it's more controllable than other 4-shots. Its objective range is worse than most MGs, but in this case, the RPT has enough to make up for that. A tier. DFR Strife. With the same damage, controllability, and fire rates as the Avances, the Strife has a great base. It may not have the super high capacities, extended barrel, or 6x scope, but what it does have is far more interesting. Able to use belts or box magazines, the DFR Strife can have the reload mechanics of an assault rifle, perfect for standard ammo in a 40-round magazine. While 70 rounds of high power may seem like a low belt capacity, that's better than the 50 of the Avances, so I actually use it on this gun where it's neglected on the Avances. Lastly, a 90-round belt feeds a fully suppressed build, with a full auto damage model second only to the AK-5C. Fully suppressed builds, especially ones that aren't overly restrictive on the damage, which is seen on the SCZ and VHX, are consistently a huge plus in my book. I like to live that flank lifestyle, and this level of stealth always seems to help. Let the normies have their Avances with a higher capacity. I'll take the Strife and its special features any day. S tier. M60E4. This is without a doubt what I would consider the best Vault light machine gun. From an objective viewpoint, it has a unique damage model. Unlike many others, it doesn't compete for its niche because it's the only MG that can lay claim to being one step down from the high-power LCMG. It also offers this strong damage in a 200-round belt. On a personal level though, that strong damage really appeals to me, and if it weren't for the M60, I would have lamented that no other gun really comes close to the LCMG's insane potential strength. A more moderate, lower recoiling gun while still being incredibly powerful at a low-end fire rate and with a massive belt? What a dream. If this were the basis for a fully fledged weapon with complete customization, it would be an easy S. But due to stiff competition at the tip-top and limited vault gun nature, I gotta leave the M60 in A tier. I still love it though. XM8 LMG. There's something oddly compelling about an assault rifle LARPing as a light machine gun. No matter what allure it has though, at the end of the day this thing's stats take quite a few hits compared to your 2042 MGs. It's got the same fire rate as the standard ammo Avances or DFR Strife, but its 5-shot zone is a third smaller and it recoils a heck of a lot more. So comparatively it loses out on damage and control, but I have a few reasons not to mind so much. As a lighter gun it has a tighter hipfire than the others, pairing well with a laser sight, and the XM8 has a rapidly loading detachable magazine with 100 rounds. It's got the capability of being oddly aggressive, and typical for MGs it has a 6-shot minimum damage, so it's still good for range, though I would recommend the bipod as practically mandatory for anything past mid-range. Could be better, but I find the XM8 quite interesting. B tier. Hold on, I realize that I haven't made any phallic-related jokes yet in this video. We can't have a current year Professor Mem tier list without that. So, balls gun. Am I right, guys? There you go, hope you liked it. Ooh, I'm playing with my M240B and Type 88 LMG. Just like with the M16 and M416, these two vault guns are so similar that it's best to rank them together. This time, in addition to looking so alike, they both have the same capacities up to 200 rounds, the same low-end fire rate, and the same muzzle velocity. The difference here is in the damage, what I consider a minor discrepancy, both killing in 5 shots to 100 meters, but the M240B also has a 4-shot kill zone for the first 9 meters. A comically small distance in this game, yet this small change comes with the M240 having longer reload times and, crucially, more recoil. The ease of use of the Type 88 is far better to me than having excellent damage at a distance you'll rarely be fighting at, especially with an MG. It almost feels arbitrary, like a jest even. Additionally, the Type 88 has better customization in the places that matter, optics and muzzle devices. While these both fall under the category of steady MGs with good range, and I am happy to acknowledge that the M240B is a well-performing design, when my preferred alternative is so similar, I'm left with no reason to use the less preferred. That means I'm not even gonna think about that gun. As for the Type 88 itself, it's like an extended barrel standard ammo Avances just with more recoil because the Avances is kinda bullshit, but hey, it is a longer 5-shot zone. A good MG, but with no ammo type or fire rate change, just like the XM8. So yeah, B tier. And the M240B can go in D tier. RPK-74M. For a while I was pretty caught up in the fact that the RPK seems to be in most metrics a worse version of the XM8. They're both what I would call lighter assault MGs with detachable mags and tight hipfire. The RPK has almost identical damage except for being the last of the few MGs to fall to a 7-shot kill. It has a lower fire rate, seemingly identical recoil despite those two facts, and smaller magazines with less reserve ammo and slower reloads? Can you blame me for not feeling enthused? The few things the RPK seems to get are as follows. Faster velocity, the slower fire rate means it's easier to control and less accuracy loss, and the first shot recoil multiplier is lower than the XM8, meaning automatic fire feels less jarring. While the numbers tell me which one I should favor, I have to admit these handling qualities of the RPK do make the weapon feel nice to use in comparison. Perhaps on a different day I could say that the RPK deserves better, but with these two guns practically competing, when I choose to give the edge to the XM8, the RPK seems a little pointless. D tier. LMGs are probably one of my favorite weapon classes, and I think that comes through in the ratings. I have a hard time ranking something below B tier unless it has what I perceive to be a particular deficiency, such as the PKP-BP's seemingly unnecessary recoil, the M240B's seemingly unnecessary recoil, and the RPK-74's seemingly unnecessary recoil. With the M240 taking multiple smaller stat hits for a mere 9 meters of great damage, it has to be lower than the Type 88, an incredibly similar gun that works out to being an alright sustained fire MG. It nonetheless sits below the Atlantis with its similarly large belt and consistent damage, but nearly balance-upsetting recoil control. Then the RPK, while having its moments, similarly falls short compared to the slightly faster, slightly stronger, higher capacity and faster loading XM8, and while the RPK offers a more pleasant firing experience, that doesn't feel like enough. If it actually had measurably less per-shot recoil than the XM8, the stats would feel more justified. Indeed, it's somewhat harsh recoil that keeps the XM8 in its place. Punchy recoil can be forgiven on powerhouses like the M60E4 and LCMG. The LCMG has the capability of being nostalgically slow and brutishly powerful, or refreshingly fleshed out for close range, and the M60 is comfortable just dishing out strong and slow damage almost on the same level of the LCMG's highs, at capacities nothing else as powerful could dream of. The RPT-31 sits at third best damage but falls a long way down compared to the other two, made up for by its attachments including a scope and shortened barrel, 200-round belts, and vastly improved control. Speaking of which, the DFR Strife has the dreamlike handling, fire rate, and damage of the Avances, with lower capacities but a hella cool magazine system and best of all a fully suppressed LMG build, strong among automatic weapons. Hell yeah! That said, time to move away from the full autos and talk about some Marksman rifles. DM7. The DM7 can cover a lot of ground for this class, its configurations running up against the roles of lighter and heavier marksman guns, though some would consider it to be on the light side of both damage and fire rate. It's hard stuck at a 3-shot max damage, but that means its headshots are much more valuable since they have a high multiplier. The 2-shot DMRs get basically no bullet-to-kill benefit from landing a single headshot. Sorrow, whom I respect as someone who has done so much work and really knows what they're talking about regarding the weapons of Battlefield 2042, considers the DM7 perhaps the worst gun in the game, and even made a YouTube video detailing why he thinks as much. While I must admit that all of his points are valid, to a complete casual like myself I admire the DM7 as a weapon that feels good to use. More so than any of the other guns that could be considered typical DMRs, the DM7 just works for me. Its recoil is low, but I must admit that goes in hand with the low damage, and in general, I don't really fancy typical DMRs in 2042. This is my favorite of them, but that's not enough to put it above B tier. SVK. The SVK is a gun that's just too dang slow to hold my attention. It may 2-shot out to excellent ranges, but unlike a sniper rifle it is incapable of landing a one-hit headshot, so I am quite less than thrilled with its plodding pace. Sure, it may be uniquely positioned as a gun that can 2-tap far faster than a sniper for most reasonable combat ranges with pretty nice recoil, but such a playstyle has never appealed to me, partly because it can feel cheap when it works, and partly because it kind of sucks the joy out of long-ranged play. While having fast projectiles and long-ranged scopes, it technically shouldn't be any harder to hit targets than with a sniper, but it encourages less care with your shots by its semi-automatic nature. Don't get me wrong, a 2-shot semi-automatic is powerful, but there are others which do the same thing faster and which still cover ranges in which I actually care to engage with semi-auto. At longer ranges, it still falls to a 3-shot, a minimum matched by the DM7 and several other faster-firing guns. I'm either brawling or sniping when using DMRs, and the SVK sacrifices so much speed and ammo for better performance for a middle ground range that I don't find very important. D tier. VCAR. I think I finally figured out what my problem with the VCAR is. It's the muzzle blast. Every time you fire, a stupid amount of gas vapors flash in front of your view, and as you should know, getting flashed is quite distracting. While suppressors or the Warhawk compensator fix this and make firing look like it should, there's no way I'm giving up my shortened and extended barrel attachments. The good news is, that is the only problem I have with the VCAR. Ever the hipster on the lookout for oddball weapons, this updated take on the last game's pistol carbines is right up my alley. Standard is like a better version of the DM7's aggressive close combat builds. Almost the same damage, less recoil, faster muzzle velocity, and faster firing even at its slowest with extended barrel. It actually feels more like a rifle carbine since it doesn't fall to 5 shots until 100 meters. Close combat is more pistol carbine-like, as it drops that quality, but since it retains a 3-shot until 30 meters and is able to fire super fast for a semi-auto, it can rival the TTK of high fire rate submachine guns. With attachments to capitalize on range like extended barrel and scopes, as well as close combat with drums, shortened barrel, and laser sights, I love both sides of this coin. A tier. I know what you're thinking when you see that this is the tier list so far. This guy's fucking nuts. Need I remind you that I specifically told you I have odd tastes and that would factor into the video? BSVM. Oh gosh, where to start? An integrally suppressed gun, it provides mild stealth capabilities at all times with no stat drawbacks. And while it lacks proper muzzle customization, it has shortened and extended suppressed barrels. On top of that, its stat niche is like a lighter version of the DM7, killing in 3 or 4 shots but with a shorter 3-shot range, though with 20-round magazines and firing much faster. So fast for a DMR in fact, that it merits a well-functioning fully automatic capability. Even its slowest fire rate makes it feel like a Shosha, and its fastest is quicker than the RSC SMG. It, like the V-Car, can have submachine gun TTK, but between its min damage and max velocity, the BSVM's long-ranged 4-tap is appropriate for a marksman weapon when using semi-auto. That's not even to mention the close combat ammo, which converts this thing all the way into a super fast and weak assault rifle like a close combat M5A3, with slightly punched up damage. Though, with a lower capacity and reserve, much wider DMR level hipfire, and quite substantial recoil, the close combat configs definitely feel like a secondary function rather than an equal to the high power. But the presence of both polar opposite models with big fire rate swings even possible within them due to the barrel changes is just packing too much functionality to be anything lower than S tier. G428. I gotta admit that from an objective standpoint, the G428 is a pretty alright gun. It has a 2-shot kill, but unlike the SVK, it isn't overly slow and cumbersome, with speeds closer to the DM7 and some very nice recoil with good capacities and high ammunition reserves. I have to say it, I've realized that my gripes with the G428 are mostly just based on the fact that I find it very uninteresting. I've seen that performing with it is not hard, but this gun just doesn't fit my tastes, and there's some statistical reasons why. The standard ammo has very little claim to being stronger than the DM7, with its 2-shot kill only going to 20 meters and still falling to a 4-shot. The high-power ammo extends the 2-shot to 40 meters, which feels much more appropriate, and tightens up minimum damage to a 3-shot kill, but at the cost of dropping its fire rate. Now, as this gun was added after the M39 and SVD, which I will discuss shortly, it's troubling to me that both of those guns have higher capacities while the M39 has a faster fire rate and the SVD has better damage. If I want a 2-shot, I can't rebuff that this one has the best handling by far, but it's late to the party and feels a bit too slow, weak, and boring by comparison. C tier. M39 EMR. Now, one thing that needs to be made apparent before I talk about these things is that not a single one of them has acceptable recoil. Not only are the objective recoil value of these Vault DMRs too high compared to others in this class, but the recoil animations are also maddening, shoving the view model unnecessarily hard. This leads to all of them being hard to use at their max fire rate outside of close range without the assistance of a bipod. Without one, your shot reset is going to feel unreasonable. That being said, the M39 AMR is my favorite because it's the fastest and does the damage of the high-power G428, at least as far as shots to kill zones go. It also gives a massive 29-round capacity with a pile of ammo in reserve, great if you're an idiot like me who doesn't know how to use a marksman rifle properly. With a 2.5 times thermal optic and laser sight, this undoubtedly feels like the best DMR for 2-shotting in that 40-meter range, surprisingly aggressive and effective. And with a 3-shot minimum at any other distance, at least you still have long-range capabilities, even if those follow-up shots aren't the easiest. B tier. SVD. Aside from their shared recoil problems, the Vault DMRs are also statistically pretty similar. The SVD fires a bit slower, but its 2-shot range goes out to 75 meters, finally giving you a marksman-worthy 2-shot range with a fire rate far better than the SVK. However, the capacity is lower, but still good, 16 rounds, and muzzle velocity is slower. I'd argue recoil gets worse as you go along with these Vault DMRs, but that just goes hand in hand with power increase. So the SVD seems like it's taking the M39 into a more range-friendly direction, but with less velocity and only able to get a 5x scope as compared to the M39's 6, it kind of feels like the gun lost the plot. It's only really better in those intervening 35 meters that it adds to the 2-shot range. It still feels like a mid-range locked gun, even more so than the M39, just with more 2-tap reassurance. That's something, but not much. D tier. M1 Garand. Now if you didn't like the change from the M39 to the SVD, you're just gonna love the change from the SVD to the M1. They have the same fire rate and the same shot to kill zones, but the Garand suffers from a capacity of only 8 rounds, slow reloads for the capacity, the lowest reserve of the Vault DMRs, especially with no alternative mags, no barrel attachments, no underbarrel attachments, only 2 decent optic choices, both of which are far worse than their modern alternatives, and in my opinion, the worst recoil yet. As reparations for all that it endures, the M1 has the faster muzzle velocity like the M39, and its damage is boosted to provide a few benefits, specifically on headshots. With a max damage of 70, it can actually one-tap heads until 30 meters, unique for marksman rifles. And with a minimum damage of 45, it is capable of killing in 1 headshot and 1 body shot at minimum damage, which all other 2-shot DMRs are locked out of. So it's a far worse SVD, just with situational advantages to headshots only. E tier. Not to mention it's so poorly animated as to be disrespectful. The only reason it's not in F is because murking people with it is a power play. My preference for the unusual and disdain for stagnant-feeling weapons probably shows best here. The V-Car, so rare to see in-game it may as well be a cryptid, gets to be A tier because it subverts class norms, but also because it genuinely feels like a fun and aggressive weapon that is capable for much of its class's long range, defeats automatics in mid-range with its control, speed, and accuracy, and competes in close range with fast 3-shots. The BSVM is a gimmick, but also a 2-in-1, a fast and powerful lighter DMR, a quasi-high RPM assault rifle, and quite configurable in its fire rates within those 2 roles. The DM7 being either a tad slow or a tad weak would have been fine, but it's both of those things, and they kind of exacerbate each other. But since it's the only middle ground gun I have to assign it some value. Its low recoil also means I feel more comfortable with it. Then, there's the 2-shots. This has never been a favored genre of guns to me, except in Battlefield 1 where the RSC was the one example, so these don't start off on strong footing. For one thing, there's too damn many. The G428 has too much in common with the M39, has too much in common with the SVD, has too much in common with the M1. The only standout is the slow and powerful SVK, but it makes me feel like a sniper who quit trying to be good, and it's just too boring. I admire the M39 best for its aggression, as that might as well be the emphasis for anything other than the SVK. It's the fastest and has a decent 2-shot range with the highest capacity. Recoil is harsh but won't impede your ass kicking at 2-shot distances and slightly further. The G428 is the best handling but can be configured to be either as fast or as strong as the M39, but not both. It may deserve better due to its greater modularity, ranged performance, and ease of use, but it bores me to the point of having a low pick rate. The slower SVD has a longer 2-shot range but paradoxically worse velocity, giving it only a 35-meter mid-range window where it's any better than the M39. The Garand sucks even compared to that, but lets you style on people. Yikes. Quite an absence of well-liked guns. With 75% being B tier or lower, this just isn't my class. Let's see if sniper rifles fare any better. SWS-10. This is a gun that lets you play sniper your way. You can have long range, second only to 1 as far as ease goes, or you can be fast, but not too fast of course. Not unless you want to ruin your chances at accuracy. Fucking cycling animation. I find myself disappointed though that even if you optimize the SWS-10 for range on a class that's supposed to be the best for just such a thing, your max bullet velocity is still lower than 4 of the Marksman rifles, the LCMG, and the AN-94. It feels nonsensical and puts a limit on how well you're able to hit shots, though it seems clear that the reason they did this is because they want one sniper rifle to stand out as the best for distance, and it's not this one. With the dedication to range only playing off in part, and the fact that close combat is really not great, the high modularity of the SWS can feel underwhelming. But at least it's there, and the gun at a baseline provides high capacities and above average fire rate for its performance, as well as a full suppression build on a sniper and a master key underbarrel. No other bolt action comes close to doing this much. S tier. DXR-1. The DXR doesn't bother itself with being too flashy or modular, and that's because it doesn't have to. The DXR-1 is straightforwardly the best sniper for sniping. Its high power ammo deals 75 damage at any range and flies faster than any projectile in this class, matching up to the highest velocity typically available in this game when paired with its extended barrel attachment. This will produce a frighteningly slow shot output, but I really don't mind it as the cost for some excellent sniping. The fastest this gun can go with standard ammo is 40 RPM, which still seems really slow, but it's about 43% faster than the max range build. So for this gun it's a significant speed boost, and with 11 rounds to a magazine, this ammo type also has plenty of use, rather than feeling like the lesser option when compared to this thing's bread and butter config. I like the 6KU suppressor for standard ammo since none of the muzzle devices seem to matter and it doesn't disrupt velocity or shots to kill unless the enemy has body armor. A good gun, it varies little but excels at its class's niche. A tier. NTW-50. This game's anti-material rifle is unexciting to me because it only has two modes: doddering but nonetheless cheap one-shot machine, and lackluster anti-tank weapon. If you're giving me the choice of being a more effective scummy infantry farmer or being more effective against vehicles, I'm gonna take that moral high ground. It's better utility for the team as a whole, but I know I'm reducing myself to have basically an awful sniper rifle as my primary weapon with it losing its ability to one-shot. It's a hard pill to swallow, having to make that choice, whereas in the previous game you had no compromises for your AM rifles and your one-shot was harder to pull off, so it felt much less cheap. While the more powerful AT ammo can do a good number on some lighter vehicles, and helicopters god bless, it has comically little effect on some things like the main battle tanks and especially the MAV. At least its headshots are still instant kills and feel very vindicating. And don't get me wrong, the infantry one-tap ammo is fun and works well with a low power optic due to its slower velocity, but I can't bring myself to justify it most of the time. C tier. XCE bar. The XCE bar probably appears as a mixed bag to most people. It is similar at a baseline to the SWS-10, but with lower capacities and longer reloads. It also cannot get a long barrel attachment, so its max muzzle velocity is further range limiting, something I already took issue with on the SWS. On the other hand, the bar always has a 60 RPM fire rate, meaning almost all of its configurations fire faster, especially high power, and it has more total high power and subsonic rounds. On the topic of subsonic though, the reason I see the bar as more than these pros and cons is because it can get a fully suppressed build, and its optimal setup is far better than the SWS-10. Faster firing with a faster velocity and killing in 2 shots at any range, correcting a major hang-up as the SWS's fell to a 3-shot. The XCE bar is a much better feeling stealth sniper, and it's a playstyle I like quite a bit, unique, gimmicky, and effective. The fully suppressed build is my default, but there's always an alright normal sniper with a fast RPM to fall back on when more range is needed. A tier. Goal Sniper Magnum. This gun is really nothing special. At best it can equip a few optics that the others can't by virtue of being a vault gun. It would fit as basically no more than a single configuration of the SWS-10. It's pretty much standard with extended barrel and a few RPM higher fire rate. With a total lack of muzzle and underbarrel attachments aside from a bipod, and magazines with lower capacity and lower reserve, especially so on the 10-rounder, I see very few reasons to use the goal. The best I can give it is that its fire rate is on the higher end for its muzzle velocity and thus its range, but just barely. The velocity is only as high as the max on the XCE bar, so it's limited for range, but for only having one option it could definitely be worse. But when I look at that XCE bar ammo, I'm reminded that yes, it has a terrible capacity and reload time, but it does the same velocity firing much faster. Despite all this, the goal can't be seen as awful, because snipers all do basically the same thing anyway, and modularity doesn't exactly shift the weapon around much. To the average player who doesn't change their rifle config, this would seem just as valid as anything else, as it fits right in balance-wise. D tier. Yes, if I want range, proper sniping is much more my speed than using a DMR, given of course I'm not just using a strong assault rifle anyway. In any case, there's a clear split going on here. While the max range and fully suppressed builds on the SWS-10 fall short of the best, which is a hard pill to swallow when you commit to them so hard, the good far outweighs the bad, since the SWS can do these and more. It can double its own fire rate, it has high capacities, it even has a shotgun, unmatched in sniper rifles. The best performance for range is reserved for the DXR-1, and boy do you feel it. The slow speed is not an impediment, and even if you think it is, the standard ammo build rocks as a closer to average sniper. The XCE bar has its frustrations with low capacities and restrictive velocities, but its stronger, faster, easier to hit suppressed build than the SWS-10 makes it perhaps the most powerful in the game. Combined with the consistently high RPM of the XCE bar, you've got some reasons to use this thing, but probably stick to closer range than other snipers. Then across the divide you have the NTW-50, a wishy-washy anti-armor option without much confidence for infantry confrontations on one side, and a disgusting kill farmer on the other. When my strongest impressions of this gun are meh and ew, it can only go so high, even if you can mess with lighter vehicles and the headshots feel unusually satisfying. Lastly, the perfectly fine Goal Sniper Magnum. Sniper rifles are pressed for interesting stuff. There's only so much you can do with them. So yes, it's not much worse than a configuration of anything else, but when it lacks anything interesting, you really feel it cause the gun is entirely indistinct. With a lower max velocity like I lamented on the bar, the fact that this thing is on the slow end doesn't feel made up for in the places that matter. A single build, average to below average stat spread, piss customization. Technically barely any worse than the others, but completely uninteresting. Well, that's that. Time to fill up our last tier list. MCS 880. Now I wouldn't say I'm a traditionalist, but these newfangled self-loading shotguns just ain't living up to the majesty of a good old pump action. Slower than the shotguns of yesteryear, the MCS 880 makes up for this with damage and range. It has an amazingly configurable buckshot. Number 4 shot has a disgusting spread paired with disgusting damage for easy one-shot kills in CQC, and Double-Aught Buck has a pinpoint spread for a shotgun, allowing it to consistently one-tap out to its allowed 19-meter range. What I take issue with is how much the damage scales, with the larger spreads having more pellets at the same damage or more per pellet. Whereas the tight spread of Double-Aught Buck feels like it should reward accuracy since you have to be much more precise, it rarely feels any better for one-tap range than the number 1 buckshot, the happy medium setting. Also, the slugs are too bad to get into here. Watch the big video for my rant. While range is limited and the damage of the buckshots are a little too lopsidedly scaled, each still has a distinct use and the shotgun is still powerful, so A tier. GVT 4570. The lever action is such a double-edged sword, man. A constant push and pull of pro versus con. It's essentially a fast but weaker sniper rifle, somewhat like a close combat build but pushed further. The thing is though, even though that framework sounds interesting, the 4570 falls short in too many areas. Rather than having a fast-loading high capacity like close combat ammo does, it's a 6-round capacity filled one by one. The highest muzzle velocity is slower than any close combat sniper, and there are no meaningful barrel mods. Its fire rate doesn't feel fast enough to justify how much shit it deals with based on a knee-jerk reaction, but I have to remember the fire rates of snipers are really slow in this game, and by comparison this is actually a marked improvement. High power ammo is faster firing and with a better 2-shot range than any close combat sniper, but the fact that this is a manually cycling action that has no way to avoid a too slow velocity and falling to a 3-shot kill feels almost wrong. It's too much of a range limitation on a slow precision weapon. The standard ammo takes a huge range cut for an almost indistinguishably faster fire rate, but when you're reloading one by one, a faster speed feels comparatively brisk. And lastly, the reason I can't bring myself to put down the 4570 is that it still kills in one headshot at any range, and its follow-up shots are a lot easier to hit with rapidity than a sniper due to not having their debilitating scope movement. It's my fast little sniper dropout. I can understand why many people wouldn't see the point of using this over something like the SVK though. B tier. 12M Auto. So I have a few reasons for appraising the 12M poorly. I don't like using it, and I really don't like using it. I prefer my shotguns strong, and if they have to be slow, so be it. This thing is so weak, and if you miss 2 pellets you'll be missing out on a one-shot kill. But more often than that you'll be hitting even fewer, even at very close range, because the spread on this thing is enormous. It relies entirely on its fully automatic capability to haphazardly spray out a smattering of weak-ass projectiles until the entire area in front of you is more lead than air, and a small fraction of your pellets have made it onto the target enough times to close out the kill. The only thing that saves the 12M from being bottom of the barrel is that the slugs actually make sense in this gun. Like, if it weren't the same on every shotgun, I would say, this is a well-balanced damage model based on the gun. Auto-loading and in an 8+1 round capacity through a detachable magazine with the highest slug reserve, the high recoiling and slow-moving 2-shot kill at any range is pretty aight. D tier. Hey there, if you like one-shotting with the NTW-50, you should try getting a life. You should try this much more admirable alternative. A fucking crossbow. It may have a slightly slower projectile and a shorter one-shot kill range of only about 30 meters, but at least you get to actually keep your soul. There are some other nice benefits too. The shot output is much faster, even without factoring in the substantial reload time of the NTW-50, and your kills will be quiet and low profile. The Ghostmaker is the flankster's best friend. 30 meters is more than enough range to do hella work when you're cruising in stealth and style. If your bloodlust extends to further distances though, fear not, for the Ghostmaker's 3x headshot multiplier ensures that good aim will get you a one-shot from any distance. Or better yet, equip the explosive bolt and lob heavy sticky grenades at whatever you may manage to hit with it. And if you hate yourself, you can equip the bolt rack. The Ghostmaker R10 really has something for everyone. That is, everyone based enough to use it. S tier. Rorsch Mark IV. This is a gun that's all about trade-offs, and personally, I find it's a damn good deal. As a railgun, it suffers from charge-up times and a lack of customization, and in exchange its firing performance is unlike any other. Take the high-power capacitor, the charge-up creating a consistent yet significant delay, harsh for a sniping weapon, yet its projectile velocity is almost 5 times as fast as the DXR-1's. The unprecedented projectile velocity means that you only have to give most shots a mere modicum of a lead, if any at all. Now, the damage falls to 3 shots past 200 meters, unlike the sniper rifles, a necessary limit to this ridiculous range, but it can still one-tap the head at any distance, and the mag and reserve capacity are much greater than any sniper. However, that 20-round magazine isn't so great on the burst and stream capacitors, but they have a much faster charge-up, the damage of a slow strong assault rifle, fast fire rates, and far lower recoil than expected. The burst and automatic modes even exhibit above-average anti-vehicle damage for an infantry automatic weapon, without the hassle of using AP rounds and their reduced infantry damage. I find all of these modes favorable, and the weapon is just extremely interesting. S tier. NVK S22. Maddeningly similar to the 12M Auto, it's at least making some improvements in my book. So while it's not great to have such a close repeat, since I don't use the 12M, it's actually more like, here's a usable version. With the same base fire rate, though semi-auto only, and very similar damage, its damage is barely better and hardly consequential, but what's more important is that the spread is actually permissible. That spread alone makes the gun much better in my eyes, and the slugs are a mixed bag. Still being much better for this fire rate, you can hold more in the mag than the 12M, but just barely. And they reload much slower, being 1x1, so it's not a great feeling. Still better in every way than the MCS, and the upshot is that it has the highest slug velocity, since the slugs aren't slower compared to buckshot unlike on the other shotguns. This pairs with the availability of a 4x hybrid optic to make for a Looney Tunes-ass DMR. Still suffers from the fact that, for the most part, it's a weak shotgun with poor range in a long-ranged game, but still better than the alternative. C tier. Late breaking news, gentlemen. After I initially recorded this, DICE dropped an update that doubled the shell reserves for every ammo type, meaning there's now tons of buckshot shells and an actually acceptable amount of slugs. Thanks, DICE. Thanks for showing you care. Sometimes. This may be enough to bounce the weapon up to B tier as being basically the best that a fast shotgun could get, but the fact still stands that I prefer stronger. And I actually think I can say that I like the surprisingly good Master Key and M26 underbarrel shotguns better as standalone weapons. That said, let's round up all these puppies. Such a various batch. Only half of these feel like they can actually be compared in reference to each other. The MCS 880 may be slow, but with different impactful shot types, it's already the most interesting, with the best long-range and best short-range buckshot. Besides, I like slow. After that, you've got the S22, something that's already a little too fast, poor at range, but redeemed by some more favorable slug qualities. The 12M Auto has the least useful buckshot, but fully automatic detachable magazine slugs ain't bad. Or at least, it's the most not bad that slugs can be, depending on whether you value range or having your ammo more readily available. The 4570 Government is a spiritual successor to bolt-action carbines, with some good and some bad. It has a few maddening deficiencies, but enough things to keep me enjoying my time using it. Then at S tier we have some real heavy hitters. The Rorsch is similar to the BSVM the way it packs 2.5 guns into one on an already interesting base concept, including a number of one-off features. Then the Ghostmaker. Oh man, it's like a meme weapon was turned into the best thing in the entire game. It gives you a fun challenge to hit difficult shots or get close to the enemy, with heavy penalties for missing, but rewards you with instant kills of all varieties. One taps to the body, headshots at any range, explosive bolt kills at any range, and it's stealthy while doing it. This and the BFP-50 are probably my top 2 weapons in the entire game. Alright, so there you go. My work here is done. And now I can move on with no regrets. And with that, now you know just how poorly I utilize the information that I come across. I can learn everything there is to know and still have a bad opinion. Remember that my tier lists or anyone's tier lists really shouldn't inform how you feel about the weapons you like, and anything can be good to use based on your preferences and playstyle. For instance, I even got a lot of good plays with the Goal Sniper Magnum while I was getting clips for this video. It, like most guns, is perfectly capable depending on the circumstances, but I still have plenty of reasons for leaving it in a low tier placement. Many tier lists are BS anyway, especially in a game like Battlefield with so much variety and agency in gameplay. So in the end, I make my tier lists and my videos for fun, so I hope this was fun for you too. Remember that if you're interested in this content, there's a whole hell of a lot more of it in my 5.5 hour long review and gun guide, where I also go over specialists, gadgets, and grenades. More importantly though, did you see that animated Patreon promo segment? That was put together by the very talented Locked In, community member, friend of the channel, and animator here on YouTube. They put a ton of work into this quality animation, and let's be honest, I consider this model fan art, and they worked with me to create this promotional material for me that I will be using in all my videos going forward. All that is to say, it's a massive compliment and contribution to the channel at no cost to myself, and I find it an honor to receive such a significant and frankly very useful gift. Locked In posts first-person gun animations to their channel, where their talent for animation as well as humor is apparent. They handcraft their own models and showcase impressive and entertaining animations on a regular basis. As someone who always has an appetite for such videos, I'm glad Locked In's channel was put on my radar, even if it weren't for the fact that they've done so much for me. And let me be clear, Locked In did not ask for this effusive shoutout. This is just my way of saying thank you and recognizing a genuine talent. I also want to thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. It may not mean much to you, but it is a level and type of support that means a whole lot to me. Remember to check out my Patreon if you want to support my work or get perks. I cannot overstate my appreciation for my patrons and their backing. So thank you to Moonvive, Jason, Lost Gerbil, Venk, Patrick Maurizzi, Locked In, Rin, Tai Long, 2000, Jackie Seifert, and Evan Phillips. Patron or not though, I hope things have been going good for ya. Till next time, I've been Professor Mem. Thanks for tuning in.